The Ikari Stay Hotel in Fukuoka was a perfect machine for sleeping. Each room was a small, ruthlessly efficient pod of blonde wood and muted gray fabrics, designed to strip away the chaos of the city outside and leave only a profound, humming silence. For Ethan Cole, a freelance conference interpreter, it was an ideal environment. His job required him to exist in a state of intense, disembodied focus. His mind a bridge between the rapid-fire Japanese of a tech CEO and the nuanced English of a venture capitalist. At the end of the day, he craved not comfort, but a complete and total absence of stimuli. He had been in Fukuoka for 2 days, working a week-long international robotics conference. The days were a blur of technical jargon and panel discussions in a vast, air-conditioned convention center. The nights were for studying. He would return to his room on the 11th floor, shower, and then spread his notes and glossaries across the small, wall-mounted desk, preparing for the next day's onslaught of vocabulary. On the first night, he had returned from the conference to find his room impeccably clean. The bed was made with crisp, white linens. The small bathroom gleamed, and the complimentary yukata was folded neatly on the pillow. He remembered noticing his toothbrush was on the left side of the sink, when he was almost certain he had left it on the right. He chalked it up to jet lag, a simple misremembering in the fog of travel-induced exhaustion. An overzealous housekeeper, nothing more. On the second night, the feeling of unease returned, sharp and undeniable. He had spent 10 hours translating a dense presentation on machine learning algorithms, and his throat was dry. He remembered the 2 complimentary bottles of Kirin mineral water the hotel provided daily, and that he had placed both of them in the mini-fridge to get cold. He opened the small, silent refrigerator. The 2 bottles stood side by side. He reached for one, his fingers closing around the cool plastic, and then he stopped. The seal on the cap was broken. He pulled the bottle out and held it up to the light. It was not a manufacturing defect. A small plastic ring was distinctly separated from the cap. He unscrewed it. The telltale crackle of a fresh seal was absent. He looked at the water level. It was not full. A small amount, perhaps a single sip, was gone. The other bottle was untouched, its seal firmly intact. He stood there in the humming silence of the room, staring at the bottle. This was not a mistake. Housekeeper does not enter a room, open a guest's water bottle, take a small drink, and then place it back in the fridge. The act was too specific, too deliberate. It was a violation so subtle and yet so bizarrely intimate that it felt more like a message than an accident. Ethan's mind, trained to find precise meaning in every utterance, reeled. There was no rational explanation. He was on the 11th floor of a reputable hotel in one of the safest cities in the world, but the evidence in his hand was irrefutable. Someone had been in his room, and they wanted him to know it. The sterile, anonymous space that had been his sanctuary now felt tainted, occupied by an unseen, silent presence. He was no longer just a guest. He was a specimen under observation. He poured the contents of the open bottle down the sink, the clear liquid vanishing with a quiet gurgle. He felt a ridiculous urge to wash his hands, as if he had touched something contaminated. He placed the empty bottle in the small rubbish bin, then took the second unopened bottle and placed it on his desk, in plain sight. A control subject for his unnerving experiment, sleep, when it came, was fitful and shallow. He dreamt of the clean, minimalist lines of the hotel lobby twisting into a labyrinth, the polite, smiling faces of the staff turning into blank, expressionless masks. The next morning, driven by a need for some kind of external validation, he went to the front desk. The lobby was a cathedral of calm, smelling faintly of bamboo and white tea. A young woman with a perfectly placid smile and a name tag that read Aoki greeted him with a slight bow. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," she said in flawless, unaccented English. "How may I assist you today?" Ethan felt a surge of self-consciousness. In the bright, serene light of the lobby, his complaint seemed absurd, the ramblings of a paranoid foreigner. "Good morning," he began, his voice lower than he intended. "I have a strange issue in my room. 1107. Last night, I found that one of the complimentary water bottles in the mini-fridge had been opened." Aoki's smile did not falter, but a flicker of polite confusion crossed her eyes. "Opened, sir?" "Yes." The seal was broken, and a small amount of water was missing. It was then placed back in the fridge. She bowed her head slightly. I am so very sorry for this concerning discovery, Mr. Cole. That is highly unusual. Our housekeeping staff is trained to the highest standards of hygiene and service. Perhaps it was a bottling defect from the manufacturer. The seal was physically broken, Ethan clarified, feeling his frustration mount, and it was not completely full. I see, she said, her voice a smooth, placating murmur. She typed something into her computer, her movements efficient and discreet. I have made a note in your file, and will speak with the head of housekeeping immediately. Please allow us to send 2 new bottles of water to your room with our compliments. We are deeply sorry for any inconvenience this has caused. It was a masterclass in professional deflection. She had apologized profusely, offered a solution, and logged the complaint. All without truly acknowledging the bizarre reality of what he had described. He had been handled, not heard. Defeated, he thanked her and went to the conference. That evening, he returned to his room with a sense of profound weariness. 2 new bottles of water, in addition to the 2 normally provided, sat on his desk with a small, printed card offering further apologies. The bottle he had left on the desk as a control was gone. The room had been cleaned, the bed made, everything returned to a state of perfect, sterile order. He tried to push the events from his mind, to focus on the one thing he could control: his work. He showered and sat down at the small desk, pulling out the stack of notes he had made during the day's sessions. He was preparing a glossary for the final day's keynote speaker, a renowned professor of humanoid robotics. He laid his handwritten pages out, his pen hovering over the paper. His notes were a mix of English and Japanese, a chaotic scrawl of technical terms and phonetic reminders. He scanned the pages, his eyes moving over his own familiar handwriting, and then he saw it. On a page detailing the nuances of proprioceptive feedback sensors, there was a single word he had not written. It was near the bottom of the page, set apart from his own script. Unlike his hurried scrawl, this word was printed in perfectly formed razor-sharp letters, as if it had been stamped onto the page with a miniature printing press. The ink was a dark, glossy black, completely different from the blue of his own pen. The word was in Japanese. It was a single kanji character, stark and alien against his own notes. Because beneath it, in the same perfect, mechanical English lettering, was its translation. Thirst. The pen slipped from Ethan's fingers, clattering onto the polished wood of the desk. He stared at the character, at the word. A single drop of black ink in the ocean of his blue script was a brand, a mark of ownership. His private notes, the intimate record of his own thoughts and professional struggles, had been invaded. This was no longer about a misplaced toothbrush or a half-empty bottle of water. Those were subtle, deniable intrusions, designed to make him question his own sanity. This was an explicit, undeniable act. The tormentor was no longer just a presence. They had a voice, a vocabulary. And their first word was a direct, chilling reference to the very thing that had started it all. Thirst. A wave of nausea rolled through him. He stood up and began to pace the small, claustrophobic space of the room. He felt the walls closing in, the minimalist design no longer calming but suffocating. He was trapped in a meticulously curated box, and someone else had the key. He thought back to the woman at the front desk. Aoki, her placid smile, her polite dismissal. Was she part of it? Was this some elaborate, sadistic prank orchestrated by the hotel staff? Or was it just one person, a ghost in the machine, moving unseen through the corridors and service elevators? He looked around the room, his interpreter's eye for detail, now a paranoid's curse. The television screen was a black, unblinking eye. The air conditioning vent was a listening ear. The lock on the door, a standard keycard system, now felt laughably insecure. He thought about leaving, about checking into a different hotel, but the idea of walking down to the lobby, of facing those polite, smiling masks again, filled him with a new kind of dread. To run would be to admit defeat, to show them he was scared. He had a terrifying, gut-wrenching feeling that showing fear was the entire point of the game. He had to find a rational explanation. The housekeeper. It had to be the housekeeper. Someone with a key, with a reason to be in his room every day. Tomorrow he would stay. He would skip the morning session of the conference, feigning illness, and he would wait. He would see who came into his room, would confront them. He took the page from his notes, the one with the black alien word, and slid it under the corner of his mattress. He then took another piece of paper and scribbled a note in his own messy handwriting. Please do not clean room today, thank you. He hung it on the outside of his door, the small piece of paper a fragile shield against the coming day. That night, he barricaded the door with the small, elegant armchair, a futile gesture that offered a sliver of psychological comfort. He lay in bed, fully clothed, the lights on, staring at the ceiling. The humming silence of the room was a living entity, canvas onto which his mind painted 1,000 phantom sounds, a floorboard creaking in the hall, a soft click at the lock, the whisper of a uniform brushing against his door. He must have drifted into a state of exhausted half-sleep because he was startled awake by a soft metallic sound. It was the sound of the mail slot in his door, a thin, brass-lined opening for letters and messages, clicking shut. He sat bolt upright, his heart pounding. He had not heard it open. He crept to the door, his bare feet cold on the floor. He peered through the peephole. The corridor was empty, a long, silent tunnel of identical doors. He looked down. There, on the floor, just inside his room, was a single folded piece of high-quality hotel stationery. His hands trembled as he picked it up and unfolded it. It was not a letter. It was a photograph, printed on glossy paper. It was a picture of him asleep in the very bed he had just left. The photo was taken from the corner of the room, from a high angle, as if from the ceiling. His face was turned towards the camera, his mouth slightly open, a picture of absolute vulnerability. And in the bottom right-hand corner of the photograph, printed in the same perfect, mechanical black lettering, were 2 words: "Good morning." The photograph fell from his trembling hands, fluttering to the floor. The image of his own sleeping face, captured from an impossible angle, shattered the last vestiges of his composure. The note on the door, the barricade, his plan to wait it, was all a child's game. His tormentor wasn't just a ghost in the machine. They were the machine. They saw everything. He scrambled for his phone, his mind a white-hot blur of panic. Didn't care about the conference, about his job, about showing fear. He had to get out. He booked a room at a different hotel, a large, anonymous, international chain near Hakata Station. The transaction completed with a few frantic taps. He didn't pack. He grabbed his wallet, his passport, and his laptop, stuffing them into his work satchel. The rest, his clothes, his notes, his dignity, he left behind. He wrenched the armchair away from the door, the legs scraping a raw scar into the polished floor. He didn't look back. He fled down the silent, pristine corridor, his footsteps echoing in the unnatural quiet. He didn't wait for the elevator. He took the emergency stairs, his descent a dizzying spiral of concrete and steel. He burst out into the serene, sunlit lobby, a man escaping a fire no one else could see. The same placid, smiling staff were at their posts. He saw Aoki at the concierge desk, her expression as calm and perfect as ever. He strode to the main checkout counter, avoiding her gaze. "I need to check out," he said, his voice a harsh croak. "Room 1107. The clerk, a young man in a crisp suit, looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Of course, Mr. Cole. Is everything all right? I have to leave," Ethan said, sliding his keycard across the marble countertop. The clerk typed into his computer. "I see you've already settled the bill for the week, sir. We will just need to charge you for the ... Oh." He stopped, his eyes fixed on the screen. He blinked. "That is very generous, sir." "What?" Ethan asked, his patience frayed to a breaking point. The clerk looked up, a faint, confused smile on his face. "It appears a tip was added to your final bill this morning for the housekeeping staff. For 500,000 yen, he bowed his head. "On behalf of our entire team, Mr. Cole, we are deeply grateful for your patronage." Ethan stared at him, the blood draining from his face. 500,000 yen, nearly $4,000. A sum so absurd, so extravagant, it could only be a final mocking gesture. A payment for services rendered, price for his terror. He didn't say a word. He turned and walked out of the hotel's automatic glass doors, the cool morning air of Fukuoka hitting him like a physical blow. He didn't look back. He walked half-blind through the busy streets, the orderly chaos of the city, a welcome relief from the suffocating, curated perfection of the hotel. He found a small, anonymous coffee shop a few blocks away and sank into a chair in the corner, his body trembling with the aftershocks of his escape. He had to understand. The camera, the photograph of him sleeping. It was the one piece that defied all logic. He pulled out his laptop and, with a sense of morbid curiosity, logged on to the Akari Stay Hotel's website. He navigated to the room descriptions. He found the page for the Executive King, the type of room he had occupied. He scrolled through the list of amenities: complimentary high-speed internet, premium linens, rainfall shower. And then at the bottom of the list, under the heading Enhanced Security Features, he found it. For your peace of mind, each room is equipped with a state-of-the-art, motion-activated security camera. The system is monitored 24/7 by our dedicated in-house security team. Ethan stared at the words, the truth hitting him with the force of a physical impact. It wasn't a hidden camera, it was a feature, a luxury, part of the perfect, efficient machine he had so admired. Someone on the dedicated in-house security team had decided to play a game. Someone with access to the master keys, the guest logs, the billing system, and the live feed of him sleeping in his bed. Someone who knew he was a translator, who had looked up the Japanese word for thirst. Someone who was probably watching the security feed from the lobby right now, watching him flee. The horror was not that the system was broken. The horror was that the system was working perfectly. He closed the laptop. The mystery was solved. But the fear remained, deeper and colder than before. He looked out at the bustling street, at the anonymous faces passing by the coffee shop window. The world was not a random collection of chaotic events. It was a series of perfectly interconnected systems, and he would never know who was watching the monitors.